boy who shouldn't have lived. A boy had been found in the snow. Word had spread through the small village like wind in a snowstorm. No one knew anything one minute, then everyone knew everything the next. Some swore the rumor started before the scavengers even returned, though no one could explain how. A vicious snowstorm tore through the village. The wind howled so fiercely it nearly tore houses from their foundations. The village chief dug through any wreckages until everyone was accounted for. Some were injured more than others, but thankfully no one was left in a life-threatening condition. At daybreak, the village sent out as many able-bodied people as they could into the wilderness, searching for anything they could salvage to repair the damage. But while they were out, they noticed an unconscious boy half buried in a pile of snow. He was blond, his face deathly pale, almost rivaling the snow around him, and the tips of his fingers tinged blue with frostbite. No one could figure out how he'd survived in such a state. He had been there long enough for snow to settle on his body, but there was no way to tell exactly how long he had been there. But he wore little more than rags stitched together from leftover fabric, so he wouldn't have lasted long before dying of hypothermia. But what unsettled them the most was that his clothes were drenched in blood that couldn't possibly be his own. He had no external injuries that blood could have come from. They hadn't seen any villages nearby. He was much too young to have wandered that far out alone. The scavenger party concluded that his parents had abandoned him. One of the men brushed the snow from his face before slinging the boy over his shoulder. He wouldn't be able to fight off any wolf attacks while he carried him, but they decided to get him back to the village to clean him up. The boy was laid in a hospital bed, and some of the villagers took shifts to watch over him. They gently poured warm water over him to thaw him, but he remained unconscious. Weeks passed, and many started to believe he would never wake up. When he first opened his eyes, he was met with relief by many but suspicion by others. Some couldn't look past the blood, saying it was proof that he was cursed. Others argued that he was just a child, so there was little he could do to cause them harm. One of the villagers handed him a bowl of soup, which he quickly slurped up. They asked him what he could remember. All they wanted was something to answer their questions and ease their fears. But unfortunately, he remembered nothing. Not why he was all alone, not where he came from, not even whose blood he had on him. Only his name, Damian. Snow was all Alex knew. No matter how high in the village he was, there was only snow as far as the eye could see. His father had told him legends of a sea of green fields and beige deserts. He believed them when he was a child, but now that he was older, he knew they couldn't possibly be real. It would snow eventually, and all that would be left was white. Alex scraped the snow away before crouching down in the small paved area next to their house. Wind danced against his skin and smoke from a nearby cook fire wafted in his direction. His parents told him to scrub the clothes clean in the wash basin outside. This was a job that he did often enough that he was able to do it fairly efficiently. The wash basin was growing rough and splintered from repeated use. He would have to sand it down later. But just as Alex was finishing up his last article of clothing, he heard a voice. "Damian, could you carry this wood into the house for me?" A woman stood in the doorway of one of the wooden houses across the road, waving her hands above her head to draw attention. Damian diligently responded to the call for help, hurrying to the woman's side. Even if a significant portion of the village hated Damian, they couldn't deny he was useful. He was much faster and stronger than you would expect just from looking at him. But this usefulness was a double-edged sword. It only made him more suspicious to an ever-growing number of people. There was another young man next to the house that looked to be the same age as Alex. He was chopping larger chunks of wood into smaller ones with a prominent scowl on his face. Gritting his teeth, he put excessive force into each swing, driving a deeper and deeper cut into the tree stump the logs rested on. Damian started crouching down to pick up some of the pieces of wood from the pile of smaller chunks when he collapsed, fresh blood from his now broken nose dotting the snow. The young man stood over him. With balled fists, he grimaced down at Damian's injured body. "My dad died on the expedition they saved you. I wish they'd never found you. You're nothing but a curse." Even after all that time had passed, those who had lost loved ones still couldn't cope with the loss. Especially not when Damian's existence was a constant reminder of their failure. "God, I wish you would just die. You've never done anything good for this village. All you've done is bring pain and misery." He lifted a foot, holding it over Damian. Alex couldn't just sit by and watch. He had to stop this. Alex jumped to his feet, dropping the wash basin and letting the water spill everywhere. "Jax, it isn't his fault," he called out. Jax lowered his foot, placing it firmly on the ground. "You don't know him, no one does. What if he's actually here to kill all of us? Even if he did before, he doesn't remember anything now." Alex shot back. It was true. They knew nothing about Damian. For all they know, he could have been sent to hurt our village, but knew nothing now. Damian had been staying in the village for the last 10 years. If he was going to do something, he would have done it by now. Alex crouched next to Damian to get a better look at his nose. It was definitely broken and out of place. Andrea had always told him that everyone deserved to be treated when injured, so that was exactly what he was going to do. Alex slid his hands under him to pick him up. "You wouldn't understand. You didn't lose anyone on that trip." Jax picked up his axe again. "It's not just me that feels this way. We all do," he called out as Alex left. But Alex didn't bother giving him the time of day. Alex laid Damian on one of the beds in the hospital. They weren't the most comfortable, but they were the best the village could do with the resources they had. "Are you awake?" he asked. Damian hummed and tried to sit up, but Alex held him down. "Keep resting, at least until your nose stops bleeding." Alex waited until Damian relaxed to stand up. He opened the cupboards, rummaging around until he found the right supplies. He knew vaguely where everything should be, but but just because it should be there doesn't mean it will. Alex occasionally glanced at Damian to make sure he was still okay. Usually, the village doctor was here, but she wasn't today, so Alex was on his own. Alex had treated Damian before. His parents were always too busy to look after him. His father was always out of the village, and his mother was always working or doing housework, so he spent most of his time with the village doctor, Andrea. She wasn't less busy than his parents. In fact, she was usually busier. She had to give medical attention to anyone who needed it all by herself. Eventually, she decided to make Alex useful, even if it was just keeping the patients company while she fetched the right supplies. As he got older, she gave him more complicated tasks, eventually learning to treat small cuts and bruises all by himself. One day, Damian came in with a scrape on his leg. Andrea was busy elsewhere at the time, so Alex had to treat him. Damian had been helping someone carry some boxes, but he had slipped on the snow and scraped his leg against a rock. Not that he had heard any of that from Damian himself. He was just as silent then as he was now. The longer Alex took looking for supplies, the longer Damian would be in pain for. He had to place things on the counter under the cupboard so he could see further back. He fished supplies from the cupboard and laid them at Damian's side. Alex started putting things he didn't need back in the cupboard, but he wasn't watching where he moved his arms, so he knocked a roll of bandages on the floor with his elbow. Shit, he muttered under his breath before picking it back up and putting it back in the cupboard. Alex finally went back over to Damian. He started by wiping the blood off of Damian's face. There was a lot more of it than Alex first realized. First thing Alex had to do was move Damian's nose back into place. This wasn't something he had done before, so he would preferably leave it for Andrea. But he didn't have the luxury of time to look for her. Alex knew the theory behind it. He just had to trust what Andrea taught him. Taking a deep breath, Alex pushed Damian's nose so that it was back in its rightful place. Damian squealed, but it was a necessary evil. Sorry, I'm almost done, Alex mumbled, picking up an ointment, massaging it into Damian's nose. The ointment was supposed to help with pain, but Alex had never been injured enough to know if it actually worked. Then he picked up a cream, applying a healthy amount to Damian's nose. He had heard that it would help injuries heal faster. There, I'm done. Damian sat up, and Alex perched himself on the edge of the bed. Jax didn't mean what he said. He was just upset. He waited for Damian to say something back, but that response never came. You don't speak much, huh? Now that he thought about it, Alex had never actually heard Damian speak. The only people who had were the village chief and those who were with him when he woke up. It's okay to be shy. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. That was when the door to the cabin opened. Oh, Alex, what are you doing here? Andrea walked in and approached the bed. Damian broke his nose, and I was helping him. Andrea leaned forward, lifting a dark-skinned hand to Damian's chin. She moved his head to examine his nose closely. You did a good job. Maybe you should be a doctor too. Keep practicing, and you might truly save lives someday, she said with a wink. All Alex could muster was a sheepish grin and an awkward laugh. He hadn't done much more than help with cuts and bruises. The village would be in a bad shape if they were left to rely solely on him. Andrea stood up, brushing a lock of tightly curled brown hair out of her face. You two run along. I'll clean the rest of this stuff up. She began picking things up from the floor and putting them back in their places in the cupboards. Alex hadn't realized he had knocked more things on the floor. Thank you, Andrea. He took Damian by the hand, pulling him to the door. But he stopped when the doctor spoke again. Actually, the village chief wanted everyone to gather in the square. I believe he wants to make an announcement. Andrea slid a box to the back of the cupboard before closing the doors. The village chief had made announcements before, but it was never so sudden. Usually, it would be about an issue with the village. But nothing was broken, and he didn't think they were short on resources. Do you know what it's about? Andrea pursed her lips. She glanced at Damian, then at Alex, and then downward. You should just go see for yourselves. Alex couldn't quite place it, but there was something he didn't like about that answer. Come on, Damian. He grabbed Damian's hand, pulling him out into the square. The square was packed. It was clear everyone had already arrived aside from Alex, Damian, Andrea, and a handful of others. There were many groups chattering amongst themselves, but there were too many talking at the same time for Alex to make any of it out. Once everyone was present, the chief climbed up to the wooden platform at the edge of the paved area and cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. Then he started his announcement. I have been discussing a certain issue with members of our village. The chief always spoke slowly during his speeches, almost as if he were a storyteller drumming up tension in his audience. It was one of the things Alex hated most about him. Alex's heart pounded in his ears. He knew causing a scene would only make it take longer. He just wanted to know that this was not about what he suspected it was. Many of you have been wanting Damian gone since he was brought here, but I thought those of you would warm up to him eventually. However, tensions have only risen since then. The chief let out a long sigh. I have come to the reluctant decision that Damian will be exiled from the village. His body froze. What? Alex furrowed his brows, yelling much louder than he meant to. Everyone turned to Alex, and Damian, since he was standing next to him. He could hear murmurs. Alex couldn't make them out, but he still knew exactly what they would be saying. He stared the chief directly in the eyes. Damian has done nothing but help us since he was brought here, and this is how you repay him? He'll die out there. No, it can't happen. Alex wasn't going to let an innocent die. Need I remind you he was covered in blood when we found him? A voice in the crowd yelled. Alex couldn't make out who it was. He might be dangerous. What if he's only pretending to have lost his memory so he can catch us off guard and kill us? Another yelled. That's insane. Alex took a deep breath. He's been here for more than 10 years. If he wanted to do something to us, he would have done it already. The chief let out a sigh, turning to speak directly to Alex. He is the cause of strife. It is in the best interest for this village, and that is what I have to take into account. Alex sucked in a breath, readying himself for another retort, but he was interrupted. I understand. Damian pursed his lips. The chief stepped down. Good. Can you come with me? Damian nodded, following closely behind him. Alex reached out to stop him from leaving. He still wasn't going to accept this, but he was stopped by a hand resting on his shoulder. Alex turned to see his mother with a frown on her face. Alex, I think you should go home and rest. Alex clenched his teeth. I can't. I have to. Her frown didn't change. She just continued to stare in silence. Alex didn't want to fight with his mother, so he just complied, letting her drag him back to their house. He flopped down on his bed. Alex wouldn't consider himself to be friends with Damian. The only times he had ever spoken to him was when he was helping Alex's parents and when Alex was treating the cut on his leg. But those really were just Alex talking at him, considering Damian didn't say a word the entire time. Despite that, he still didn't think Damian should be left to die. He hadn't done anything wrong, but there was nothing he could do about it. The people of the village had already made up their minds. There was no way Alex was going to be able to convince a significant number of people to let him stay. Alex glanced around his room. There had to be something he could do to take his mind off of everything. But then he had an idea. There was something he could do. Hopping off of the bed, Alex hurried downstairs to find his mother. His father's job involved standing guard at the gate in the mornings and evenings, so he wouldn't be home yet. She was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. That was a quick rest, she remarked, not moving her eyes from her chopping board nor stopping the knife in her hand. I just wondered if you knew when Damian would be leaving. It was possible they had already kicked him out. They didn't care about him, so they had no reason to give him time to prepare himself. Tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. That meant he still had time. Thank you. Alex rushed back to his room. He had time to prepare, but not enough to be wasting it. He got to work shoving anything he thought he might need into a backpack. Spare clothes, tools. There were some things he couldn't get until tomorrow, so he'd have to be quick. Once he was satisfied, Alex lay back down. Tomorrow would be a big day, a day Alex wouldn't let Damian face alone. He would need all the rest he could get. As soon as Alex ate the breakfast his mother made, he rushed to his bedroom to scoop up his backpack. He swiped a small tent and a dagger from his parents' bedroom, both of which belonged to his father. His father could just replace them if Alex wasn't able to bring them back. He had a number of weapons for when he would go out with the expedition team, but a dagger was the only one Alex could be sure he knew how to use. Alex's final pit stop was at the hospital. He threw open the cupboard, his mouth dry. They would need medical supplies, but taking too many would hurt the other villagers if they got injured. He settled for just a roll of bandages, which he shoved in his backpack. They had more, and Andrea likely wouldn't notice one roll going missing. The door to the hospital opened. Alex froze, but then he took a deep breath, reminding himself that if he acted suspicious, his plan would be ruined. He turned around to see Andrea standing in the doorway, her face unreadable. I didn't think you'd be here, she noted. Alex needed an excuse. Quick, I just wanted to make sure everything I'd knocked over had been picked up. He scratched his neck. But I see everything is fine, so I'll be going now. Damian would be leaving soon, so Alex didn't have time to talk with Andrea. He walked just above his usual walking pace to the door, not daring to look Andrea in the eyes. If he looked like he was in a hurry, she would know something was up. But then she stretched out an arm to stop him from passing. Shit, I'm not going to ask what you're planning. Only if you promise me you won't be stupid. Her stare told Alex everything he needed to know. She knew exactly what he was doing. Alex sighed. Andrea might consider what he was about to do to be stupid. No, she definitely did. That was the reason she stopped him. But she wouldn't let him go if he didn't say anything. I promise. Good. She retracted her arm. On you go. With a brief wave goodbye, Alex darted towards the village gate. He could see his father and another villager opening the gate. Alex kicked off the ground, running as fast as he could without slipping on the snowy ground. If he didn't get there before Damian walked through the gate, all of his work would be for nothing. Wait up, Alex called out. Damian stopped and turned to face Alex, his eyes blown wide. But Alex's father was the first to speak. Alex, what are you doing here? He let out a hearty laugh, ruffling Alex's hair. Alex stepped back, taking a deep breath. I'm going with Damian. Everyone was silent. Eventually, Alex's father spoke again. Alex, I can't let you do that. It's dangerous out there, Dash. And you're okay with sending Damian out into that danger? Alex clenched his fists, staring his father in the eyes. I just want to make sure he finds somewhere safe to stay, then I'll come back. There's nothing you can say to dissuade me. Alex's father sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He still wasn't going to let Alex have his way. Alex grabbed Damian's hand. Come on, Damian. He pulled, but Damian remained firmly planted on the spot. Damian pursed his lips. Alex, you shouldn't come with me. He tried to wriggle his hand out of Alex's grasp, but Alex tightened his grip. I just want to make sure you're able to stay somewhere safe. Alex pulled at him again. Damian didn't put up any resistance this time, letting Alex drag him through the gate. Once they were both out, the heavy gate closed behind them with a thud. What he was doing finally hit Alex. The wolves lived outside the village. When he was a child, he had many sleepless nights listening to them howl. Even though the wall was made of nothing but logs tied together with rope, it was enough to keep the wolves out, but now that wall wasn't going to protect him anymore. That was why no one went out unless they had to, or unless they were Alex right now. If the scavenger team had found any other villages nearby, Alex would have heard about it, but he hadn't. But Damian will have come from somewhere, so there had to be other people out there. Do you have any idea about where we could go? Alex looked around. All he could see was snow and trees. No paths or trails they could follow. Nothing that would give them a sense of direction. I thought you might. Damian glanced at Alex, but but his gaze quickly turned to the ground when they made eye contact. "Since you insisted on coming with me." Alex scratched his neck, letting out an awkward chuckle, but he quickly snapped himself out of it. They had to make use of the daylight hours they still had. If they just sat here, the wolves would eat them. Alex slung the bag over his shoulder, resting it on the ground while he pulled the dagger out. Stumbling back a few steps, Damian stared, eyes wide. "It must have been the dagger. It's just in case the wolves attack us. I'm not going to hurt you." Damian in Nitali scrunched up his face, but he soon relaxed it. Then he nodded, straightening his posture. But he fiddled with his fingers and purposefully didn't look Alex directly in the eyes. With that, Alex started walking in a random direction, Damian following a few paces behind him. Alex looked to Damian, hoping he would strike up some kind of conversation, but he just walked in complete silence, still not looking at Alex. It was at times like this when Alex wished he could read minds. He couldn't imagine he was still weirded out about Alex carrying around a dagger still. It had to be something else, but he couldn't think of what it could be. His chest tightened. There was no turning back now. "Do you still not remember anything?" Alex feared the answer would still be no, but there was no harm in asking. Anything Damian could remember would help them in this situation, even if it was small. But Damian just shook his head. "Nothing." Alex scratched his chin. It was strange that he had forgotten everything so suddenly. Instinctually, Alex assumed that Damian must have hit his head or something. But Damian didn't have any injuries when he was found, so that couldn't be it. "Alex," Damian spoke up, pulling Alex out of his thoughts. "Can you tell me why you really wanted to come with me?" That had to be the last question Alex was expecting. "Didn't I already tell you?" Damian stopped, turning to look at Alex. But when Alex stared back, he glanced away, biting his lip. "What I mean is that I hadn't spoken to you until just before we left. So I don't understand how you could care about me enough to want to risk your life for me. At first, I was worried the villagers had told you to come with me to make sure I wouldn't try to stay hidden in the village. Or maybe to kill me or something. It's nothing like that." Alex blurted out. He could understand why Damian felt like that. In truth, Alex didn't completely understand why he wanted to come with him, so there was no way Damian would. "I really did just feel like it was unfair for them to kick you out so suddenly like that. Coming with you was an impulsive decision." Damian said nothing in response. He just stood there, clearly lost in thought. Alex glanced up at the sky. It was starting to get dark. They found some nuts in a tree to eat. Alex had eaten them before, so he knew they were edible. There weren't many of them, but it was all they could find. After setting up their tent, Alex lay down. Damian did the same, but he was much closer to the edge of the tent than to Alex. It was so cold, he could see the air he breathed, and the ground was rough. He didn't have his warm house or his comfortable bed to sleep in. "We might be warmer if we sleep closer together," Alex mumbled. "It doesn't feel cold." Damian mumbled, but shuffled closer to Alex anyway. His head rested up against Alex's chest. Alex sucked in a breath. He could feel his cheeks flush. Alex expected Damian to move closer, but not this close. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe steadily before opening them again. "Do you remember anything about your parents?" Alex asked. He needed something else to occupy his mind. "I don't know how they could just leave you to die like that. My parents were killed when I was little," he mumbled. "They were killed? By what? Or by who? Maybe that's whose blood he had on him." But Alex couldn't imagine what kind of thing would kill his parents, but not him. "They were killed by." He paused. "Because they..." Damian scrunched up his face. "I don't know. I feel like I do know, but I don't at the same time." Alex had hoped Damian might remember something, but clearly it was too much to ask for. "Hopefully you'll remember soon. If he remembers that, he might remember other things that could hint towards where he came from. What about your parents?" Damian cocked his head. "I know of them, but I don't know anything about them." "Oh," Alex scratched his head. "I think they're just normal." He'd never had to think about them in this way before. "I mean, they were usually too busy to take care of me, but they still did things for me sometimes." Now that he was thinking about her, he remembered that he hadn't told his mother he was leaving the village when he left the house this morning. She probably went looking for him, and she wouldn't find out where he went until his father was finished with his shift. If he had told her, though, she would have done whatever she had to stop him. But he could have left her a note somewhere for her to find after he left. It wouldn't have stopped her from worrying about him, but it would have been the least he could do. He glanced back down at Damian, who had already closed his eyes, breathing shallowly. Alex did the same in a vain attempt to fall asleep. Every time the wind hit the tent, Alex's muscles twitched. His body was readying him for a fight that would hopefully never come.